This is Dave Stanton for Carbatec. Operation and safety. Operation. Please ensure you follow your particular router manufacturer guidelines and check that the router cutter is securely fitted into the router's chuck. Check that you have the correct size cutter shank relative to the chuck or collet you have in your router. Check that the router is firmly secured to the selected router mount plate or the router lift and lock mounting plate. Check that the router mount plate or lift is level with the top of the router table. Also ensure the mount plate or its lift is fastened to the table. Check that the insert is the correct internal diameter for the router cutter to be used. Check that the router table is on solid surface and that the legs are not rocking. If needed, adjust the feet to make it more steady. Check that the in-feed and out-feed areas are clear without obstructions that may be present or may occur while you're using the machine. Ensure you always feed the timber in the correct direction and never backfeed or pull back on the timber being fed. Also, never attempt to machine a piece of timber positioned in between an exposed cutter and the fence. Do not remove more material in a single pass than is safe to do so. If something feels wrong, stop the machine immediately via the NVR switch. Disconnect the power supply and check through all of the previous items that I have mentioned. Pull this out. For best results, the router cutter must be sharp. Select the right router cutter for the job, depending on the thickness of the wood and the cut to be made. For dados and rebates, use the fence provided as well as featherboards or similar to feed the workpiece past the bit slowly. The router plate comes with a starter pin for three-hand shaping or template following. This allows you to guide the workpiece up to the router cutter with greater control. Use it. Start your dust collection unit before using the machine, and do not use the table without adequate dust collection connected. When using the optional dust box down underneath here, you must open the vent on the side of it to allow a good flow of air past your router. With both hands firmly hold the workpiece down onto the table and feed it towards the router cutter slowly. Using push blocks will keep your hands away from the blade. Before making adjustments, switch off the router and bring the machine to a complete standstill. The professional router table has spacer bars to advance the outfeed fence forward by either 1/4 millimeter or 1/2 millimeter. That's 0.25 or 0.5 millimeter. The spacer bars are kept on the back of the fence. Simply pull them out. Check which side of the top hat section that you want to slide onto the router table fence. You need to release the knobs a little bit first that are holding onto the fence. Slide the spacer bars in top and bottom and then tighten the knobs up on the back of the router table fence. The optional router lift is activated by using the crank, which lives conveniently there. First thing to do is to unlock, put the handle in, and you turn it counterclockwise. Then you put the crank in the height adjustment and you slide it all the way down, and one full rotation is 2 millimeters. Rotating clockwise raises the cutter, rotating counterclockwise lowers the cutter. It allows you to very finely adjust the position of the cutter up or down. Once in position, put the crank back into the lock and rotate clockwise. You will feel a little bit of resistance at the beginning as you turn the crank clockwise, but that's just the brake activating, and then you'll feel it relax. To release the other direction, and away you go. Just in case you forget, Carbatec have got up and a directional arrow for clockwise. Very, very nice. And then, of course, return. I've rotated the table around a little bit so you can see at the back here what I'm talking about. Now on the back of the table I have at the moment the optional micro adjust knobs and micro adjuster. To utilize those, first of all we need to undo the lock knobs that are holding the router table fence in position on the table. Now we're going to tighten the lock knobs on the micro adjusts. There's a couple of ways of adjusting. What I can do is I can use the scale, the tape that's adjustable. I can move that tape anywhere I want using this lock screw underneath, or I can do a sample cut and reference. I can adjust ever so slightly by moving the micro adjust screw. When it's in position, very important, lock the fence lock knob back again. In some situations, you don't need to have your fence parallel to the miter slot. Say I'm using just the cutter and I'm not using the miter gauge at all. What I would do is I would only adjust one side at a time, and that will give me more accuracy as I'm adjusting the fence. Safety. Safety glasses must be worn. Long and loose hair must be contained. Hearing protection must be worn. Close-fitting protective clothing must be worn. Rings and jewelry must not be worn. Disconnect the power to the router before performing any maintenance. Locate and ensure you are familiar with all of the machine's operations and controls. Ensure all fences and feather boards are fitted, secure and functional. Here we go. Always position and fix the safety guard above the router cutter, making sure there is enough room for your workpiece to pass under the guard. Ending operations and cleaning up. Switch off the machine when the work is completed. Leave the machine in a safe, clean and tidy state. Don'ts. Do not use faulty equipment. Don't use blunt blades. Never leave the machine running unattended. Keep the work area well lit and free of hazards. Do not allow other people to distract you while you're using the machine. This includes children. Following these simple guides will keep you safe and result in trouble-free use of your machine.